Study Section 5. Literary Theories and Appreciation. Introduction. In this study section, we will examine literary theories that are important to the study of poems. In this way, we will provide necessary background for the study of important theories that are useful in the analysis of poetry. You will also be exposed to practical criticism and literary appreciation of poetry. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this section, you should be able to 1. Read and write poems. 2. Analyze any poetry. 1. Literary theories as frameworks for interpreting poems. There are many theories in literature which are necessary frameworks for interpreting poems. According to Roberts and Jacobs, many of these were developed in the C20s to create a discipline that is comparable to other disciplines. At the heart of these theories are questions about the nature and functions of literature. Some of these show the inherent qualities of literature, while others show the extent to which literature contributes to other disciplines. The theories provide wide and divergent views on literature and literary problems. Not every theory is appropriate for every poem. However, when a major theory is chosen as a frame for a particular analysis, it can include bits of other approaches. Thus, a great deal of criticism is eclectic rather than rigid. The theories to be considered include formalism, feminism, psychoanalysis, and Marxism. Tip: criticism is concerned with establishing theoretical understanding of poems by approaching them from a major perspective, while using the principles and rules for analyzing them. Formalism. Formalism, like structuralism, looks at the inherent quality of literature. It focuses on literary texts as formal works of art. It provides readers with means of explaining the content of works and the insight needed for evaluating the artistic qualities of poems, without giving attention to things that are not directly related to the text itself. Discussion of such elements are tone, plot, simile, metaphor, and other poetic devices are formal ways of analyzing poetry. Thus, a formalist theory will provide the platform for discussing what the writer said and how he said it. The inspiration for formalist approach came from the French practice of explicating the text, a method that emphasizes detailed explanation and examination of a poem. Steps in explicating a text will be expatiated upon later in this lecture. Feminism or gender. Feminist theory had its genesis in the women's movements of 1900 and the fight for women's rights. Its main aim is to query the assumptions about women and claim more space for women in their writings. Feminist critics also project women's poems, describe how male and female characters are presented in a work of fiction, and highlight the extent to which assumptions about male and female are reinforced in the poem. Marxism. This approach focuses on the cultural and economic conditions or social situations and class relations, if there is any, in a poem. Psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis is concerned with analyzing the hidden and unconscious motives behind speech and attitude. It is also a theory that considers the connection between the poet's life experience and his major poetic preoccupation. It is a scientific theory of the mind which was propounded and practiced by Sigmund Freud and his followers. Explication. Explication is not a theory but an approach that provides the opportunity to explain the meaning and implications of words in a poem. It requires the discussion of individual parts in relation to the entire work. Through this, You'll be able to show that you have followed the important details in the poem. You understand the issues and meaning the poem reveals. You also explain the connection between the content of the poem and its technique, and discuss important aspects of the poem. Let your introduction contain general ideas that are related to your poem and your discussion. For example, the central idea is the anonymous poem. Sir Patrick Spence suggests two things. The first is the conflict between self-preservation and obedience to authority, while the second is that innocent people may be caught in the web of fighting. Describe the poem's content and its major organizing elements in your own words. Give the meaning and possible interpretations of the poem. Refer also to some of the techniques used in the poem, like unintroduced, unforegrounded quotations. The responses of Sir Patrick and his group are dramatized through this. In your conclusion, you need to repeat your major ideas, which reinforce your essay's thematic structure. In conclusion, an explication begins with a statement of the central idea. This is followed by important details in the poem with guiding phrases, like the speakers begin. He says further. At this point, step-by-step analysis is done. This is followed by references to the poet's personae words. The last paragraph reaffirms the main idea and idioms. This is followed by the style of the poet. Analyzing poetry. Literary appreciation is an important part of studies in poetry. It is the understanding of and ability to know and evaluate the literary beauties that are inherent in a work of art, and especially a poem. This refers to the ability to read, understand, and make judgment, and express opinions about the totality of a given poem. These include making comments about its forms, literary devices, language, content, and structure, among other literary devices that may be used in a given poem. A number of critical theories for understanding and interpreting poetry are available to both teachers and learners of poetry. At the heart of these approaches are questions that border on the nature, function, and form of literature. The approaches include formalism, structuralism, feminism, psychoanalysis, Marxism, critical approach, etc. Illustration. John Donne's Battle My Heart is often referred to as Holy Sonnets. It was one of the religious poems which he composed at a time when he drifted from Catholicism and became involved in religious thoughts. The poem portrays the intense personal agony of John Donne. It is a strange and complex prayer poem which discusses the helplessness of a man who is spiritually lost and in bondage with the devil. He seeks the approval and favor of God after realizing his sinful state. Donne does this through a comparison of the man's position with an usurped town. He compares himself to an usurped town or a town under siege that is trying to throw off its conquerors and willing to accept an army of liberation. He also compares the onslaught of God's love to that between a man and woman. The poet personae begins by asking God to beat him hard and damage him, throw him down and destroy him so that he can rise and stand. He also wants God to imprison him so that he can be free. He does not identify himself or why he wants God to batter his heart in the first few lines. His speech reveals that he is in agony over his troubled state. He tries to explain why his heart should be battered, broken, blown bones, and made new because of his sinful state. His soul has been taken over by the devil, and all attempt to get his freedom by himself have proved abortive. He therefore looks to God as a superior power who can save him from the bondages of sin and deliver him permanently from the hands of the devil, who has taken him captive. It concludes that unless God comes to his rescue by battering and ravishing him, he cannot be chased. The speaker's words are both connotative and denotative. Hence, many figurative comparisons are used in order to stress the poet's captivity and desire for liberation. In order to further emphasize the extent of his captivity and the need for a forceful liberation, he uses the image of marriage and divorce, love, betrothed, divorce, break that knot. As another means of stressing the need for his deliverance, the poet Personae asks God to imprison him so that he could feel free, and also to divorce him so that he could marry him. So through the contrastive changes of war or peace, marriage or divorce, God or devil, bondage or freedom, ravish or chaste, an enemy or friend, he brings out more vividly the need to deliver him. To make the irony of bondage clear, the poem uses compressed metaphor to compare a spiritual experience to something so grossly carnal. A reading of the poem therefore shows the poem's contrasting arguments. Ideas are presented in opposing pairs, as we already mentioned. Donne uses these constructed ideas to emphasize the poet's personal desire for liberation from the shackles of the devil. Literary devices. Subject matter: search for liberation from sin. Theme: the unworthiness of man in the presence of God. Form: the poem is a sonnet, a Petrarchan sonnet written in the metaphysical tradition. It is in two parts, octave and septet. The octave is in the first 8 lines, while the septet is in the last 6 lines. The style of this Petrarchan sonnet includes the use of paradox. Ideas are presented as contrasting pairs, antitheses, and in seemingly contradictory ways. Contrast: line 1 to 3, paradox: batter my heart, that I may rise and stand. Line 4, you're forced to break, blow, burn, and make me new. Line 9, dearly I love you, but I am betrothed to your enemy. Lines 10 to 12, take me to you, imprison me, for I never shall be free. Line 14, never shall be chaste except you ravish me. Images of love and hatred, marriage and divorce, prison and freedom are also used in the poem. Diction: words are connotatively used. Study section summary. In this study section, you were exposed to different approaches that are useful for the analysis of poetry. In particular, formalism, feminism, psychoanalysis, and Marxism were discussed. It was said that when a major theory is chosen as a frame for a particular analysis, it can include bits of other approaches. Finally, we provided practical illustration of poetry analysis. End of study section 5. Thanks for listening.